So tonight is the night WrestleMania 37 Night 1, and we know the opening match for WrestleMania 37 Night 1 is going to be for the WWE Championship, as Bobby Lashley defends the WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre. Now, it was announced last night that this was going to be the opening match of the show, and to be honest, it makes total sense. It really does make total sense that this would be the opening match for the show. I think this whole thing centers around Drew McIntyre. And to be honest, it probably should. I'm as glad as the next person to see Bobby Lashley as WWE Champion. Frankly, I think it's incredibly overdue. I think that, it's just a shame that Bobby Lashley's, 45 years of age? I mean, not that he looks it. I mean, looks incredible, and he could probably carry on going for at least 10 more years. He just looks that fantastic, but you just think to yourself, man, if WWE had their head screwed on properly, what they could have done even since 2018, since he returned, let alone for the last 10 years, what if they had him under contract, or if that had all worked out initially when he was there the first time around, all of that kind of stuff. It feels incredibly overdue. Nevertheless, it's great to see him as WWE Champion, and it's great to see him being involved in a featured match at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship. It's great to see a WWE Championship match, frankly, that has two full-time guys in there. I think that's fantastic. Isn't it great to see? I know people have been complaining. I know people have complained that there aren't many big stars on this year's WrestleMania. There isn't a Cena, there isn't a Goldberg, there isn't a Triple H, there isn't an Undertaker, there isn't Brock Lesnar, and all those kind of names. And my response to that is, well, you can't have your cake and eat it. That's the reaction that I always have when people are saying that, is because it's, well, what do you want? What realistically do you want from that? Because the same people that say, well, there's no big stars this year, where's Triple H, where's Brock Lesnar, where's John Cena? They're the first people to complain when Goldberg, Lesnar, Triple H, The Undertaker, or John Cena, all those names, when they're booked for WrestleMania, the first names that say, typical WWE, bringing in the part-timers, bringing in the old guard again. It's like, well, what do you want? What do you want? I think it's great. I think it's great to see that two full-time superstars are in a featured position at WrestleMania. Yes, it's not the main event. It's the opening match of the show. We'll get into why that's good in a second. But isn't it good that the WWE Championship picture is filled with two people that are going to be on Raw next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that? That is absolutely good, because that's how you build talent. The shows Raw are not that good to watch at the moment. And, you can argue, well, why are you building a new star? And Bobby Lashley in his mid-40s, whatever. I don't care about that. What I care about is that at least the guys that have been putting in the work this year, and that's what McIntyre and Lashley have, you'll struggle to find two stars that are putting more work on Monday Night Raw than McIntyre and Bobby Lashley. I'm glad to see them be in a featured spot. Even if you take everything else out of it, the storylines, the Hurt Business, splitting up, all that kind of nonsense, at least we're seeing two guys that deserve to be in this position. So that's one thing. I think opening the match on the show, as I mentioned, is the right call. I think it's the right call, and I think it makes sense. First of all, I think it's the right call because I think I think Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, Bayley's not even on the show. I think Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks should be main eventing, and we'll touch on that in the preview video that I'm going to do for that one. But I think also it's the right decision to open the show because, as I mentioned, this whole match is about Drew McIntyre and about getting what he didn't have last year. Now, last year's WrestleMania was meant to be Drew McIntyre's moment, and it still was. Don't get me wrong. Drew McIntyre, it's not as if he didn't win the WWE Championship last year. He did. He did beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 36. It's just not the way that WWE wanted that to happen. The plan was to have Drew McIntyre eliminate Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble. Did that. Epic moment, right? Epic moment. People still talk about it today because it was one of the last events that really had fans in attendance. Certainly the last big event, or I know Super Showdown was the month later, but the less we speak about that one, the better, because that's when the Fiend lost actually. So forget about that. It was the last big event that had fans in attendance. And the moment of having Drew McIntyre eliminate Brock Lesnar was incredible. The crowd went insane. He hits the Claymore. Brock Lesnar takes a hell of a bump to the outside, and then they pan out. They pull all the way out. And you just see this mass of humanity just celebrating. They are so happy. Not only Brock Lesnar had been eliminated, but they wanted McIntyre to succeed. Because there were a lot of fans in that audience that night that were big fans of Drew McIntyre and saw the potential that this guy had. So they're going crazy. They're excited because they're knowing that, one, he just eliminated Brock, and two, he's probably going to win this match. And he goes on and he wins the match and the crowd goes crazy, and it felt like Drew McIntyre had really arrived. And then everyone was waiting for this match against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania because they wanted to see Drew McIntyre win his first WWE Championship. They wanted to see the culmination of this journey, this incredible journey he's had in his career of being anointed as the chosen one by Vince McMahon on WWE television very early in his career, failing ultimately, not succeeding, failing, getting released, having to go to the independent scene, going back to Scotland, going to Impact Wrestling, hitting the indies hard, going back to NXT, and then making it back to the main roster and getting to the main event of WrestleMania and winning the WWE Championship for the first time, proving the prophecy correct. That storyline was great. That story was great. And everyone was excited to see that. Everyone wanted to see Drew McIntyre defeat Brock Lesnar in front of 70,000 people inside Raymond James Stadium and have a great WrestleMania moment. And it didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that because of the pandemic, obviously. The show was moved from Raymond James Stadium, where you're going to have 70,000 fans in attendance, to the WWE Performance Center, taped. Wasn't even a live show. It was taped on a closed set in front of 0 fans. Drew McIntyre, yes, he won. And yes, he won the WWE Championship, but he didn't get the moment. And he didn't get the moment, and that's what's important here. WWE wants him to have the moment. They want him to have that moment because Drew McIntyre still was anointed, if you will, as the top babyface, not only on Raw, but now that Roman Reigns is a heel, he's the top babyface in WWE, you could argue. So that was not only was he anointed the top babyface on Raw, but he was anointed the top babyface last year. That happened, but to really elevate Drew McIntyre to truly that main event level status and that next level, they wanted to have the moment. They wanted to have the reaction. They wanted to have the same moment that John Cena had at WrestleMania 21, that Batista had at WrestleMania 21 when they won their first World Championships, that Steve Austin had at WrestleMania 14, that Shawn Michaels had at WrestleMania 12. Those big moments where you win your first World Championship at WrestleMania, that's what they wanted to give Drew McIntyre last year, and that's what they couldn't do because it was a tape show, it wasn't even live, and it was in front of 0 fans at the Performance Center. So the plan always has been, I think, to get Drew McIntyre back to that moment and give him that moment that he didn't have last year. To be honest, I think that's the only reason Drew McIntyre isn't the WWE Champion now. Had last year happened as was planned, I think Drew McIntyre probably would still even be the WWE Champion at this point. He probably would have had a reign that lasted over a year. But once they realized actually we're probably going to be in a position where we can have fans in attendance at Raymond James Stadium for WrestleMania 37, the idea was, okay, let's get the title off of McIntyre, Elimination Chamber. That's what they did with The Miz. And once they did that, the plan, I think, always has been, and I think still is, to have McIntyre win the title back at WrestleMania. So I think that's the plan there. When it comes to opening the show, it's absolutely the right call because, again, that first entrance that you have at WrestleMania, which I think is going to be Drew McIntyre, I don't think it's going to be Bobby Lashley, that first entrance that you have at WrestleMania, that is so significant. And to be honest, it's as significant as WWE wants to make it. Now, they could have, and they're not going to, but they could have just had 2 nights of WrestleMania, 2 kickoff shows, and you could have had a random match on the kickoff show. Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, or the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, the 2 matches we saw last night on SmackDown. They could have done that. And if they have done that, I don't think anyone would have really truly complained because it's normal. It's the norm. You expected it. But some people, rightfully so, in WWE, on the creative team or on the production team, or maybe even Vince McMahon himself said, wait a minute. We haven't been able to do an entrance in front of a paying crowd, a live crowd, fans actually in attendance watching our show. We haven't been able to do that for over 12 months, right? It was early March when the pandemic first really hit in the United States and everyone was told to go home and everything shut down. We're in April now, so it's over 12 months, over a year. We haven't been able to do that entrance in front of the people, in front of the crowd. We haven't been able to do that for a year. And that's special. That's special. That means whoever makes that first entrance, that means something. That itself, forget the match. That itself, the entrance itself can be a WrestleMania moment. And I'm glad someone picked up on it. And said, wait a minute, that's significant. That's really significant. We should make that mean something because it does mean something. That is a really special moment of, there might have been a period of time of who knew if we were ever going to get fans back to watching pro wrestling. And just because fans are back at WrestleMania tonight doesn't mean going forward that's the case. I mean, it's still going to be inside the Thunderdome for a while, but it's a light at the end of the tunnel kind of situation. And again, it's significant. It's a celebration. It's a real, true celebration of pro wrestling and what everyone's been through over the course of the last 12 months. So that first entrance means something. And like I said, who's the top babyface in WWE right now? It's Drew McIntyre. Roman Reigns is the face of SmackDown, but he's a heel. He's a bad guy. Who's the face of Raw? That's Drew McIntyre. He's a good guy. He's the default top babyface in WWE. He's not the top guy, but he's the top babyface, I would say, in WWE right now. And because of that, it makes total sense to give Drew McIntyre that moment. So he gets 2 moments. Not only does he win his WWE Championship back in front of a crowd of people, which he didn't get to do last year, so he gets the moment he missed out on last year, but he also gets the honor, and that's what it is. It's a WrestleMania moment, but it's an honor. He gets the honor of making the first entrance, in front of a crowd of people, in front of the WWE Universe for the first time in 12 months. That's a massive deal. So it makes total sense that would open WrestleMania as well, because McIntyre gets that moment. Now, when it comes to Bobby Lashley, as I said, Bobby Lashley, I'm so glad. I'm really so glad that he's featured into this, because you look at him physically, he's always had all of the attributes that Vince McMahon would look for in a top superstar. That's without a question. That's always been the case. It's always been a case of, could he get it together in the ring? Could he get the opportunity? And he really became a real top quality professional wrestler in his time away from WWE. When he was in Impact, when he was on the independent scene, he got really good. And since he came back, it's been a rough road for Lashley since he's come back. Let's be honest. I think he came back and everyone was expecting big things, and then what happens? He gets paired with Lio Rush. That was good, but then he's doing the glute stuff and all of it. He was involved in some real bad stuff. And then obviously it was the Lana storyline and the affair stuff with Rusev and all that kind of stuff. It was just bad television. But finally last year, he gets paired with MVP, and it's just gold. It's golden. And the irony is that this is one of Drew McIntyre's first feuds when he was WWE Champion. Backlash last year, and it was Drew McIntyre defending against Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship. And at the time, I'm going to put over Paul Heyman here, because at the time, Drew McIntyre was the WWE Champion. And I think that was pretty much, I don't know if Backlash itself, I think Heyman was already out of that by that point. But it was the last feud, it was the last story that Heyman put together. And around the time that Heyman was removed as the executive director of Monday Night Raw, there were rumors that going into Backlash, there was people, and I believe it might have been Heyman, was lobbying, you know what? I think McIntyre should drop the title to Bobby Lashley. I think he should drop the title. I think Lashley's getting over. I see money in this pairing between Bobby Lashley and MVP. I think Lashley should win. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason for Heyman getting fired or anything like that, but that was just the rumors at the time. And then wouldn't you know it, fast forward several months later, and Bobby Lashley is the WWE Champion, and they're revisiting this for one of the featured matches at WrestleMania. It's almost as if it was a good idea in the first place, because that's what it was. And Bobby Lashley has developed well over the course of the last year, and this version of Lashley is money. This is a version of Bobby Lashley that we want to see face Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar returns, because he will return at some point. So I'm glad to see Bobby Lashley in his position. The only thing that I think is disappointing heading into this match is the breaking up of the Hurt Business. Now, I did a video earlier today talking about this, because it's been reported that Vince McMahon has given up, essentially, on Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, and it's not surprising, because that's what he does. But you look back on the breaking up of the Hurt Business, and why? The answer is, the question is why. And I don't know why. I don't have a good reason as to why they did it. Because, and I spoke about this earlier, I would understand it. And every time I see stuff like this, and ultimately it's Vince McMahon's decision, it's his company, he can do what he wants. But when I see stuff like this, I always try to think, okay, what is Vince McMahon seeing here? What is the picture that he's seeing? What idea does he have, or the creative team? What idea do they have? And what idea are they suggesting that this could help? How does this help this story? Because if the breaking up of the Hurt Business can actually help the Bobby Lashley Drew McIntyre story, then I'm okay with it. If it can help the story, if it progresses the story, if it moves it in a different direction, if it enhances the story as we head into the match at WrestleMania 37, then at least you can understand it. You can maybe not agree with it, but you can understand it. And I can't see that. I can't see it. I can't see an outcome. I can't see a part of breaking up the Hurt Business that helped facilitate this story. It was just random. It was random, and not in a good way. The only thing I can think of is that in their warped mind, or their warped perception of this story, is that somehow by breaking up the Hurt Business, it helped Bobby Lashley because it made him seem more dominant in the way that he took out Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin. But I don't see that. If Bobby Lashley and MVP were cerebral, if they were smart, if they were intelligent, they would surely the strength in numbers helps them. And this just shows how random it was to break up the Hurt Business as well, is that for several weeks, one of the stipulations for this match at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship was that Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin were banned from ringside. You wouldn't do that if you had plans to break them up, because you would say, well, we're going to break them up in a couple of weeks. We don't need to do the stipulation. So once again, it just shows that there has been no long-term planning for this. And when I say long-term, I just mean a couple of weeks. I just mean between now and WrestleMania. You would, at the very minimum, you would think they at least know where they're going. You would at least think they know that they're doing this match at WrestleMania and they know roughly what the outcome probably will be. We can plan it out from here to there. You know, we can do that, but they're not. They're going week to week, which is fine at certain points of the year, but not WrestleMania season. You can't go week to week and not even know where you're going. And that's what it feels like with the Hurt Business. And the Hurt Business didn't get the opportunity that other factions have in WWE, successful factions have. And again, I could understand it if the Hurt Business as a faction was not working. But you look at the Hurt Business, this is a faction led by MVP that took 3 people that were being, horrifically mismanaged in WWE and made them into something that was good, made them into good television, made them into a good storyline, something that was compelling to watch. Bobby Lashley was doing nothing, of substance. He's having an affair with Lana and he's flexing his glutes on television. What's the point in that? He gets in the Hurt Business, suddenly he becomes credible. Cedric Alexander, he's tag teaming with Ricochet main event doing nothing. Gets in the Hurt Business, he's credible. Shelton Benjamin, I don't know what he was doing, chasing around the 24/7 championship and looking weirdly into the camera, calling Chad Gable short, and that was about it. Gets added to the Hurt Business, suddenly he's credible. And again, now that Benjamin and Alexander are out of it, they're not going to be doing anything. They're not going to be doing anything. And again, they haven't been given the opportunity to even succeed. It was a good faction. And it was a good faction on a bad show. There's lots of Monday Night Raw that are not good, that are really not good. But the Hurt Business were. The Hurt Business were good television on a television show that is largely bad television. And yet they decided to split them up for no reason, no apparent reason. Bobby Lashley and MVP, they went to Vince McMahon and asked him questions going, why are we doing this? What's the rationale here? Why are we doing this? And it's Vince McMahon's company, I guess, is really what the outcome that they got there is. That it's not your decision, it's mine, and I've made my decision. And again, it just doesn't make any sense. And you look at other factions over the course of years in WWE, and you can judge it by how many WrestleManias they're involved in. Most factions, the big dominating factions, the successful factions, which is what the Hurt Business was. It was cool, it was successful, it was new. They all get given time. And they haven't been given time, because if you give a faction time, there are so many different stories you can tell. You can tell the formation. You can tell them winning championships. You can tell them losing championships. You can tell them the infighting until they get things right. You can tell them how they react to losses. And then eventually, a couple of years down the line, you can tell how they break up. And they break up and they all end up, better off than they were when they started off in the faction, like Evolution. Right? What were Batista and Randy Orton doing before they went into Evolution? Not a lot, because they were young superstars or they were new to the company. Coming out of Evolution, they're better off for it. And you could do the same for the Hurt Business. What were Cedric Alexander? What was Shelton Benjamin? What were they all doing before it? Nothing. But coming out of it, when they eventually do split up, they're better superstars. They're made men for it. But you can't do that if you don't give them time. And you look at these factions throughout history. Evolution, how many years were they around for? Like 2 and a bit? You look at the Shield, how long were they around for? 2 and a bit? The Authority, how long were they around for? Just over 2 years? So those big factions, and Lord knows the Authority went on way too long anyway, but those factions were given time, and they had different stories going on throughout all of it and different iterations during it. They didn't just stop it randomly during WrestleMania season. If you want it to end after WrestleMania, that would still be way too soon, but at least you could tell the story coming out of WrestleMania. The story going into WrestleMania shouldn't be about the Hurt Business breaking up. The story going into WrestleMania should be about Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. And you've almost split the story in half, because Lashley's focusing on the Hurt Business when he should be focusing on McIntyre. It's confused. It's confused. And that's been the problem just with the whole build to WrestleMania in general. It's been overly confused. But when it comes to this match, when it comes to the prediction, I think Drew McIntyre wins. I wouldn't be disappointed in the slightest if Bobby Lashley wins. To be honest, he's just won the title. He won it after Elimination Chamber on Raw. So he's only been the champion, 6 weeks? Something like that. So in reality, I would love to see it if Lashley actually, in reality, held on to it for a bit longer, because if there's anyone that should have a dominating title reign, it's someone that's called the Almighty. Not that Almighty if you can only hold the title for 6 weeks, really. It would make sense for him to hold on to it a bit longer. I don't think that's probably going to be the case. As I mentioned, I think it's probably going to be McIntyre's moment that he didn't get last year at WrestleMania. So I think Drew McIntyre is going to win this one, but there's no doubt it's going to be an excellent match. If you haven't seen their work together, they had the match at Backlash last year, and it was surprisingly excellent. And I think it'll be even better in front of a big crowd of people and on the grandest stage of them all. So I'm going to go with Drew McIntyre to win, but I think it'll be an excellent match. I really do. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Bobby Lashley defending the WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre tonight at WrestleMania 37 Night 1? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.